Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of From the Collection. Once again, we are so excited to share some interesting items from the Chapman Museum's collection with you today. My name is Becca, and I am the Program and Outreach Coordinator at the Chapman.
And my name's Maureen. I'm the curator here.
Fantastic. Ooh. Oh my god, it's a bat! It's a bat! Oh, God, I hate bats. Catch it! Oh, disappeared. He disappeared. Oh, I hate bats. Where do you think he came from?
I don't know.
What the heck was that about? I come down and try and learn about history and you two shoo me away.
Who are you?
I'm Glen the Bat in the attic. Man, oh man, I don't see where you two get off shooing me away when I'm trying to do is learn.
What do you mean by bat in the attic, Glen? You live here at the Chapman? Oh, God. You're up in the attic?
Yes, I do. And every time I come here, you disturb me. But do I swat at you? No. Do I catch you in a net? No. Do I scream, ew, I hate humans? No.
I'm sorry, Glen. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. It's just that I don't normally see bats in the museum, especially during the day.
Zophyr and Catherine told me you're doing this little history program, and I thought I'd fly down and see what it's all about. Even changed my sleeping pattern so I could see it.
Well, that was very generous of you, Glen, and I'm sorry for trying to catch you in the net.
Wouldn't be the first time you did that, Maureen.
What are you talking about?
A couple of months ago, I'm flying around the museum, looking at exhibits, come across a nice quilt hanging up on the wall. Ooh, is it Chanel? No. Well, I wanted a closer look, so I land on it. I'm checking out the colors and the patterns, and wham! You come along and throw a net over me.
That was you?
Oh, no.
It most certainly was. You grabbed me, throw me outside, all because I was trying to look at the exhibit. That's not good customer service. Maybe someone should leave a Google review. Yup, I'm talking to you.
All right, well, Glen, we have to be careful. Our visitors at the museum typically don't like to see bats, but we're glad you could join us today.
I don't know if I should even hang around after what you two just did.
Glen, please give us a second chance. I think that you're really going to like the objects that we're sharing today.
Yeah? What are they?
Well, we can't tell you that, Glen. That's kind of part of the fun of the program. You have to use your observation skills, your prior knowledge, and your historical context, and the historical context we give you to try and guess what the objects are or what they could be used for.
And we can tell you that the objects that we're going to be sharing with you today are primary sources. Do you know what a primary source is, Glen?
Not really.
So a primary source is an object used or created by someone in the past. They can be letters, photographs, artifacts, clothing, speeches, tools. We use primary sources to help us learn about the past. And here at the Chapman, we have primary and secondary sources stored in our archives and collection spaces.
In this episode, both of our objects come from the same period in history, so we'll discuss that era, what each object was used for, and any other important information. And here's a hint for you, Glen. Both objects are related to the logging industry.
Logging is when people cut down trees, right, Becca?
Yes, Glen, good job! Logging is the practice of cutting down trees to be used in different ways. So to all of you at home, I want you to take some time to think about all the things we get from trees. And if you'd like, you can write down your ideas so you don't forget them. And if you need more time, you can pause the video here. And now that you've given that question some thought, I'm going to provide you with some historical context or background information that will better help you understand the time period our objects come from. So to begin, the logging industry was very big in the Adirondacks. Any idea why, Glen?
Must be all those trees. The Adirondacks full of them.
Right, absolutely. Now, because Glens Falls is so close to the Adirondacks, the logging industry had a big impact on the growth of the area, particularly in the 1800s and early 1900s. Logging helped put Glens Falls on the map and turn it from a settlement into a village and finally to a city. But people have been using trees for different purposes for centuries. In our region, the Native Americans who lived here before European colonization included the Mohawks, the Abenaki, and the Mohicans, and all of these groups used trees in their daily life. One example is the large structures called longhouses that the Mohawk people lived in. They had wooden poles that would go into the ground, and then they would build a frame over the top of them, and then the frame would be covered in bark. They also use trees to help them move from place to place. We have lots of lakes, streams, and rivers and more. And while swimming is one way to get across,
You could fly!
okay, true, but since humans don't have wings, a better way for us to get across might be to use boats or canoes. The Haudenosaunee people often made canoes from birch bark because it's lightweight, easy to transport, and waterproof. Elm bark canoes were also used, as well as dugout canoes, which involved using a section of a tree trunk, carving and scraping and burning out the middle, so eventually you have a hollow space where a person can sit. Now, Glen, what is the weather like in Glens Falls in the winter?
I don't know. I hibernate during winter.
In our attic?
Maybe I do, Maureen. What's it to you?
All right, let's be nice. Okay. So, Glen, it gets cold here in the winter, and we often get snow. And I know you can fly, so this probably wouldn't be a problem, but when humans try to walk on the snow, they sink down into it. So in order to walk on top of the snow, people use snowshoes. Today they're often made from metal or plastic, but in the past they were made from wood. The Haudenosaunee people would bend strips of wood to create a frame and then use sinew to create webbing in the middle. They would strap the snowshoes to their feet and then be able to walk on top of the snow. It was really helpful if they needed to walk long distances. Now, as the area became colonized by Europeans, they also used wood to build their homes, their businesses, furniture, and more. And as the country grew and the population increased, the need for lumber also increased. And that's where Glens Falls comes into the picture. So, Glen, I want you to take a look at our map. What are some geographic features you notice?
Well, I see the Adirondack Mountains. Warren and I like to fly up there in the summer. Lots of insects to eat.
Ew. All right. I'm going to ignore the insect comment. Who's Warren?
My best friend, Warren the Bat.
Oh.
Now, does Warren live in our attic too?
No, he lives in a big house on Warren Street, but he does spend a lot of time at the Chapman.
Lovely. Hanging out at the Chapman. Lovely. All right. Well, you noticed the Adirondacks. Anything else? How about any waterways near Glens Falls?
I see the Hudson River.
Good! Glens Falls is right on the Hudson River, which flows from the Adirondacks down to the Atlantic Ocean. Rivers were super important to Native Americans, early colonists, and those who came after them, because they made it easy for people to move and as well as goods to move from place to place. Traveling on land could be tough, since the roads that did exist were very bumpy and hard to use. Rivers, on the other hand, were much smoother and faster. And for those working in the logging industry, Glens Falls had a lot going for it. The area was close to the Adirondacks, where trees could be cut down. Then the logs could be floated down the Hudson River to Glens Falls, where mills were located. A mill is a building that has machinery in it that helps create something. Mills cut logs into boards to be used as lumber were called sawmills or lumber mills, and Glens Falls had several of these. Once the logs had been turned into lumber, they could be transported along waterways like the Glens Falls Feeder Canal or the Hudson River to people and markets across the state. In 1850, New York State produced more lumber than any other state in the nation. Most of the logs came out of the Adirondacks and were processed in Glens Falls. And because of this, the area became known as the lumber capital of the world. So with all that historical context in mind, it's time to look at our first object. Are you ready, Maureen?
I am. Let me just get some gloves put on.
Very good.
So our first object is pretty big and heavy. So instead of holding it up to the camera, we're actually going to bring the camera to it.
Okay.
So as you're looking at our first object, start to think about what you notice. Think about the object's size, shape, color, the materials it might be made out of. If you want, you can pause the video and write down your observations. Glen, do you want to tell us what you notice?
Well, an object is bigger than me, and it's got these jagged teeth on it. Looks like they're made from metal.
Nice job. Glen, you're right. This object is about 5 feet long, and it does have teeth. What do you think those teeth would do?
Chew.
You have been hanging out with Zopher and Catherine. Too much time spent with them.
Mm-hmm. You're not wrong though, Glen. The teeth on this object would chew or cut through something, but before we talk about what this object did, tell me what else you noticed.
I think it has handles. It looks like they're made of wood.
Right again. Our object does have two handles, and unlike the teeth, which are metal, the handles are wooden.
So now that you've made some observations, it's time to make some educated guesses. Based on what you noticed and the historical context we gave you, try to determine what you think this object is or what it was used for. And again, you can take a minute, pause the video, and write down your guesses if you'd like.
All right, Glen, any guesses?
It's metal teeth and wooden handles. It's about 5 feet high. I'm not sure, Maureen. I haven't seen one of these before.
Well, this object is a cross-cut saw.
Oh, like sawing down trees?
Yeah, exactly. This type of saw would be used to cut across a tree or a log. Lumberjacks used cross-cut saws to help them with the job of cutting down trees. So the technical term is felling trees, and an experienced lumberjack could fell around 100 trees a day. But Glen, you mentioned that this saw has two handles. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a pretty big saw. I think you need 2 people to use it.
You're absolutely right. One lumberjack would hold one handle and another lumberjack would hold the other. And they would work together by pushing and pulling the saw to cut through the tree. Crosscut saws were first introduced in the 1880s, and before this, lumberjacks used axes to cut down trees. So with the crosscut saw, lumberjacks could cut down twice as many trees in a day.
Wow, very cool.
Do we know anything else about this saw? Like who owned it? Who used it?
Unfortunately, we don't. We don't even have an exact year or time period connected to this specific saw. However, we do know that crosscut saws weren't used in the Adirondacks until the turn of the century, which is around the year 1900.
Okay.
So our best guess is that this saw is from that period, which makes it about 125 years old.
Wow, pretty old for a saw.
We can, however, share more about the loggers who might have used saws like this while working in the Adirondacks. Becca, would you like to take it away?
I would love to. All right, so loggers were typically men, and they stayed in logging camps, which were close to the forest but away from their families and homes. These camps were very simple and rustic. There were cabins for men to sleep in, a dining hall, an outhouse, an equipment shed, and not much else. Up to 60 men would share a sleeping cabin, and conditions in the cabin weren't great. The cabins were usually very hot, and they smelled bad. And the men slept on bunk beds, usually with a single wooden blanket. And there were often bed bugs and lice because the men didn't bathe regularly. Hey, you like bugs, Glen?
Not those kind of bugs.
Yeah, not those kind. All right, well, the loggers would get up around 4 in the morning. They would eat breakfast in camp, and then they would go out to the forest to begin their work for the day. They often worked 14-hour days, 6 days a week. And they were paid between $25 and $40 a month, which was a decent amount back then. Logging was a year-round business. The season started in the late fall when lumberjacks would begin cutting down, or like we said, felling trees. Then the trees would have their branches cut off, and the bark would be stripped off as well. Young boys around the age of 14, called swampers, were often hired to do this job. In the winter, the logs would be loaded onto sleds pulled by horses or oxen. These sleds would carry thousands of pounds of logs, and you can see in the picture on the screen that the logs would be stacked on top of each other. Next, the sleds would carry the logs down to the river, which would be frozen because it was winter. The logs would be lined up on the ice where they would sit until spring. And then in the spring, the ice on the river melted and the logs would slide right into the river. Then they would be driven down the river to mills in Glens Falls.
There's no steering wheel on a log. How can you drive it?
That is a very good question, Glen. You're right, there's no steering wheel on a log. So the job of a driver was to ensure that the logs continued moving down the river and didn't jam. To do this, drivers rode on top of the logs as they moved down the river. Drivers would pick a log, jump on, and ride it down the river for a couple of miles. Other times, drivers might choose to hop from log to pass the time, because I imagine it would get quite boring after a while. Either way, driving logs was a dangerous job. The drivers were nearly always wet. They could get hit in the head by a passing log. And then the most dangerous part of all, sometimes if the logs formed a jam, the drivers needed to blow the jam apart using dynamite. Drivers would get in a boat, row over to the jammed logs, place a few sticks of dynamite into the jam, light them, and then get out of there as fast as they could.
Eek!
It was tough and dangerous work. Once the logs made it down the Hudson River, they were stopped in Glens Falls and sorted. Each mill would get the logs they had cut down, and then those logs would be processed at the mill. The mills would cut the logs into boards, which they could then sell. And like I said before, the boards could be shipped on the Glens Falls feeder canal and then sent all over the state or even the country. Now, before we move on to our second object, I wanted to give you a little more historical context. We've talked about how the area was filled with resources for the lumber industry and how the loggers got the trees from the Adirondacks to Glens Falls, but now we're going to talk about some of the people who benefited from the logging industry. So to begin, lots of people moved to the area during the 1800s and early 1900s to work in the lumber industry. Many worked as lumberjacks and loggers, doing the hard work of cutting down the trees and driving them down the river, but others were called lumber barons, and they were wealthy businessmen who made a lot of money by owning the sawmills or lumber mills in Glens Falls. Glen, take a look at the list of names on the screen. Do you recognize any of them?
Oh yeah, there's Crandall, like Crandall Park, and Sherman, like Sherman Avenue, and Morgan, like Morgan and Company, the restaurant.
Well, all the places you listed were named after lumber barons who lived and worked around here. Those of you who have lived in the area have probably heard these names before, and that's because many of these men gave their time and money to help the city. They did things like charity work, they donated money or land for new buildings, and more. The places were named after them to honor what they did for the community. So with that in mind, it's time to show off our second object. We are ready when you are, Maureen.
Okay, so I have the second object here. As I'm showing you the second object, I want you to think about what you notice. Think about its size, shape, color, the materials that it might be made out of. And just like before, you can pause the video and write down your observations. All right, Glen, want to share what you see?
Sure. This is the easy part. It looks heavy and I think it's made of metal. There's a hole in the middle too.
So far, so good, Glen. All of those things are true. Anything else you notice?
There's a weird symbol on the front, like a backwards L.
Good observation skills, Glen. There is a symbol on the front of our object. So to all of you at home, now that you've had a good look, use that historical context we gave you and your observational skills to try and determine what you think this object might be or what it was used for. And I'm going to give you a hint, Glen. You mentioned that there was a hole in the middle of this object. I want you to pretend that there is a handle that goes into this hole. You can take a minute and pause the video and write down your observations and your guesses.
I think it's a hammer, but the symbol in front is confusing me. Hammers don't usually have that.
You're on the right track, Glen. It is a type of hammer, and it's called a log marker. It would be used by loggers to mark who owned each log. So think about it this way. Glen, how do you mark what's yours?
I rub my scent glands on it.
Ew. Okay.
Hey, it's true. Look it up.
Great.
We believe you, Glen. We believe you. Well, humans usually mark what's theirs by maybe writing their names on things. But writing on a log would be difficult, and it would rub off while they're coming down the river.
That's true.
So instead, loggers used special hammers called log markers to hammer symbols into the ends of the logs. Each logging company had its own symbol or log mark, and when the logs were being sorted, workers could easily determine which company owned which log by looking at the symbol. You can see on the screen the different types of log marks. Some are elaborate, while others are very simple.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm holding in my hand is the head of a log marker. It's made of metal, and it would have originally had a wooden handle, which would have been inserted into that hole that we talked about earlier.
Okay.
I also have an example of a log end here.
Oh, that's what that thing is about. Okay.
Now, a log end is exactly what it sounds like. It's the very end of a log.
Yeah, it looks like the end of a log.
Where workers would hammer in that company log mark. Now, this log end has the letter B stamped all over it, which was the symbol of the A. Sherman Logging Company.
Ah.
Oh, that's pretty smart. So which company had the symbol on the log marker?
Well, this one was the symbol of the J.W. Finch and Orson Richards Logging Company. This company was started by Orson Richards, who was at one point had the nickname Lumber King of the Hudson.
Whoa, okay.
And according to records in our archives, Orson owned 5 lumber mills in Sandy Hill, which is what we know today as Hudson Falls.
Ah, okay.
And at one point, he also owned mills in Plattsburgh, New York, and Lock Haven, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
So to help supply his mills, Orson owned large tracts or areas of land in the Adirondacks. J.W. or Jeremiah Finch was also in the lumber industry, and he started his career by going into business with Orson Richards, helping to supply Orson with logs.
Ah, okay. Nice little partnership there.
Yeah. Eventually, though, Jeremiah and his brother Daniel would go into business with a man named Samuel Prine.
Ah.
And in 1865, the 3 of them would form the Finch Prine Company.
I've heard of that before.
Yes. This company manufactured lumber, canal boats, lime, and black marble.
Ooh.
The company's mills were located along the Hudson River, and they used the Glens Falls Feeder Canal to ship all of their goods.
Wow.
By 1892, Finch Prine and Company was the largest producer of lumber in Glens Falls.
Wow. Okay.
And like we said, if it sounds familiar to you,
Which it does.
it's because that company is still in business today.
Ah.
Their name has been changed to just Finch Paper.
Ah, okay.
Oh yeah, I've flown over that place. I never knew it had a connection to the logging industry. Well, I certainly learned a lot today. Maureen, Becca, your little history show was pretty interesting.
Thanks, Glenn. And once again, I'm really sorry about the incident with the net. Can we make a deal? You won't go into the museum during the day, and we won't catch you and throw you outside.
No promises.
Okay. Well, Glenn, it was nice meeting you, and hopefully we get to see you again, virtually. Maybe Warren will want to stop by one of these days?
Ugh, maybe. Warren's pretty shy, but I'll ask him. Oh, I'm gonna go get a few hours of shut-eye. I don't get how you people stay up all day. I'll see you around.
All right, well, bye, Glenn. Nice meeting you, like I said. And again, thank you, Maureen, for sharing with us some more interesting items from our collection here at the museum.
Of course, anytime.
Very good. All right, and now that you at home have learned about a few of the objects in the Chapman Museum's collection, we want you to create a piece of art that incorporates one of the objects discussed today. You can draw a picture, you can write a story, you can come up with a song or a poem or something we didn't even think of, and you can send your art to me at educator@chapmanmuseum.org along with your first name, and it might just be featured on our social media pages. Make sure you check back next month for another episode of From the Collection. Until then, have a great day, keep on learning, and make sure to visit us at the museum. We have tons of cool stuff.